Hello again, this is Will Luden, your host with Revolution 2.0, a revolution of the heart, bringing you today's episode, which is Truth plus Love equals good politics and a good life. And together, we are at episode 395. Telling the truth in love is always a winner, and it ties into the core Revolution 2.0 goal of helping us to create better lives for ourselves, our communities, and our nation. So how do we get there? How do we get to always, or at least most of the time, telling the truth in love? Well, first of all, let's take and sort of tease apart what it means to love other people and how it's similar to telling the truth. First of all, and this is kind of a slap in the face to myself when I first heard this, loving lovable people is not noteworthy and doesn't change anything. It doesn't do much. It's easy, and there's no pat on the back. You don't get any pat on the back from loving lovable people. You get the pat on the back, and you change things when you love the unlovable, the people who are hard to love. Doing the hard work is always necessary to make change. So loving the lovable, fine, good thing. Love's a good thing. But it's easy, doesn't change anything. Loving the unlovable and hanging in with them, that's the hard work that changes things. Same thing with truth. It's easy to tell and accept truth that fits our view of the world, that fits inside our comfort zone. Nothing laudable about embracing that kind of truth. Yes, embracing the truth is a good thing, but embracing only the truths that fit into our comfort zones or our lifestyles or our preconceived worldviews. Nothing laudable about that. It's I was wrong. It's those moments. It's when we hear the truth, when we research the truth, when we do the hard work of digging up truth that slaps us in the face, that challenges, maybe blows up portions of our current worldview. That's when embracing the truth makes a change. That's when the hard work of embracing new truths that shake us, that makes a difference. And speaking of beliefs, two of the core beliefs, as many of you regulars know, two of the core beliefs here at Revolution 2.0 are one, personal responsibility. Take it, teach it, and two, be your brother's keeper. The answer to the age-old question, am I my brother's keeper, is a ringing, resounding yes. There is simply no other answer. And if we look at what's been going on in the world, the prime directive, stealing something from Star Trek, the prime directive used to be personal responsibility, translated by many as every man for himself. And brother's keeper business got short shrift. So, and under that prime directive of personal responsibility, or every man for himself, the belief was that if you weren't successful, it was your fault because you were lazy or stupid. There's something wrong with you under the personal responsibility prime directive, where being your brother's keeper got shortchanged, if any change at all. And more recently, there's been a drift and then a powerful shift toward the prime directive being your brother's keeper. And that started with Karl Marx, and I'm not saying that being your brother's keeper means you're a communist. I'm saying that it started there when Marx observed that the working class was being victimized by the capitalist class. And then he wrote Das Kapital, and there were all sorts of movements that followed that. And more recently, many people and politicians and political groups are identifying other groups, persons of color, other quote-unquote disadvantaged groups, as being victimized by the capitalist class or being victimized by oppressors. And they're saying that these people need to have things given to them for free, things like free health care, clothing, food, shelter, and so on. And so that prime directive says that if you're not making it, it's because it's society's fault. The earlier prime directive was if you're not making it, it's your fault. And either prime directive by itself is just wrong. And one thing that's worth observing is that the people who are saying, you need to be your brother's keeper, most of them are not really saying, I need to be my brother's keeper, and that's going to solve the problem. They're saying, the government, somebody else needs to be our brother's keeper, or maybe even my keeper. And it's never somebody else's responsibility. It's never them. It's never they. It's always you, me, or us. It's never them. Because if we point to them, they're going to point right back to us. And who's going to do anything in a system like that? And it used to be maybe 90-10, 95-5 personal responsibility, and now it's shifting in many people's minds to 90-10 being your brother's keeper. Here at Revolution 2.0, we believe it's a mix. And no, the mix is not 50-50. The mix is about 75-75. Well, Will, doesn't that add up to more than 100%? Yes. And the world is not a series of zero-sum games where everything has to add up to 100%. As a matter of fact, most of the time the world works is when everyone's contribution adds up to way more than 100%. Marriage is a pretty good example. If you're only doing 50% of the job and your partner's doing 50%, both of you are likely to feel like that they're being cheated. If you're doing 75% and your partner's doing 75%, that's going to look like 50-50. But at any rate, I pull this off topic for a moment. Personal responsibility, brother's keeper, they both work together 75-75, maybe 85-85, but it's more than 50-50. We'll unpack that more in other episodes. We've unpacked it a little bit in previous episodes. But the main point here is that the prime directive is not either personal responsibility or being your brother's keeper. The prime directive is both, and both at more than 50%. And let's take a look at how we apply the search for truth to some of the current events. Like there's a lot of conversation about January 6th, and were these all treasonous criminals, and should they be treated and punished as treasonous criminals? Well, there were lots more people on January 6th who went to Washington to protest. And whether or not I agree with them, I firmly agree with their right to say what they were saying. The ones that split off and attacked the Capitol were buffoons, dangerous buffoons. Yes, these people should be locked up and punished to the fullest extent of the law. Absolutely. But let's note, that was a small portion of the crowd, and most of the crowd was doing what they had a right to do, whether or not you agree with them. They were doing what they absolutely had a right to do. The previous summer, the summer of 2020, there were months of Black Lives Matter riots, many of which, certainly some of which, ended with lots of learning and lots of, say it with me, burning and looting. But the vast majority of those crowds were peaceful. Whether or not I agree with what they were saying, I absolutely agree with their right to say it. The ones that burned and looted, including occupying public buildings, including police stations, should be punished to the full extent of the law. So there is an application of truth in those areas. And what about CRT? I still think that one of the first things I think of when I see CRT is cathode ray tube. You know, those old pot-bellied TVs and pot-bellied computer monitors. But no, we're talking about critical race theory. And there's a truth to be found here too if we dig for it. Is the United States history, did it start in 1619 with the first slaves? And is that emblematic of who we have been and who we still are today? Or did the United States really start with the Declaration of Independence in 1776? And is that emblematic of who we were and still are today? You dig for those facts, and you will come to a conclusion. We've done that in previous episodes, but we're not going to do that digging here. But if you do the digging, you'll come to a conclusion. There won't be any gray areas. You'll come to a conclusion. And Ukraine. What's going on in Ukraine? Lots of conversation about war crimes and Putin as a war criminal, because in part he's intentionally killing and often in ugly ways, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of civilians. But we also, if we're going to talk about war crimes based on that evidence, now let's take a look at ourselves and go back to World War II, where the United States and our allies, primarily Britain, killed hundreds of thousands and maybe millions of civilians, often in ugly deaths. But that's kind of a sidebar, but it's an important sidebar as we look at ourselves and point to Putin as a war criminal. And there's a lot of conversation about holding him accountable. Well, we're not really going to hold him accountable. We're not going to invade Russia, capture Putin, and put him on trial the way we did with the Nazis at the end, the senior Nazis at the end of World War II. That's not going to happen. If we want to do anything about the war crimes, and there are war crimes, there's ugly things being perpetrated by the Russians under Putin in Ukraine. If we want to do anything about it, we need to give Ukraine what it needs to win the war quickly. We need to help create, not necessarily, maybe not at all with U.S. flyers. We need to help create a no-fly zone. We need to give them better, bigger, more powerful weapons, and lots of them now. Expedite. You want to do anything about the war crimes? Help Ukraine win the war and do it now. That's the only thing we can do. We cannot hold the man accountable, but we can stop him. So we need to think about truth, telling the truth in love. As we look at Lent, we're going through Lent, celebrating Easter, Passover, Ramadan, or even just celebrating the Easter Bunny. We need to put ourselves into the mindset of telling the truth, including finding and embracing the hard truth in love, including loving the unlovable. And I'll tell you times I've been unlovable. I'm guessing we all have. And maybe those are the times that we need love the most. So, where do you stand? With all these issues swirling around, what are you going to do? Remember, it doesn't matter where you stand if you don't do anything. And you can start by taking positive action today, among other actions, but take action today by subscribing, encouraging others to subscribe with you, and give us a good review, hit the notification bell on YouTube, and just get involved. Spread the word. And whatever you do, whatever I do, whatever we do, we must do it in love. Without love, anything we do is empty. This is Will Luden. Talk to you next time.
You've been listening to Revolution 2.0. If you've enjoyed this stimulating, passionate, and relentless reasoning, we encourage you to get out there and do something. Follow Will Luden and learn more at revolution2-0.org.